Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully...
Nature has intended that this human to be a
A healthy, happy sex life is a most wonderful and exciting. We've all experienced curiosity about ourselves and the opposite sex. Who hasn't?
Hello, social distancers. I'm Megan.
I'm Marcella.
And I'm Colin.
And welcome to Remedial Sex
Medial
Ed.
Sex Ed. I remembered
that's
this
our
time.
podcast.
Yeah.
Remedial Sex Ed is usually a podcast where we, as three nervous adult children, take you on our journey towards sexual enlightenment. But due to recent events, we are picking up part 2 of our Corona Diaries.
So this is part 2 of Corona Diaries. In order for you to understand any of this, I highly recommend you listen to part 1. So we start the diary on Tuesday, March 18th. I have been sent home from my office. It is closed for the foreseeable future. LA County is not an official quarantine yet, but the bars, restaurants, clubs are closed. You cannot gather in groups of more than 50 people. Colin is still going into his office, and in the week prior to this, our biggest concern was what if Colin gets sick? Because Colin has a history of asthma, and, we were just kind of already a little panicky anyway, so our main focus was being good for Colin, and Colin was actually being really good. He was washing his hands, he was already wearing a mask, like, he was doing everything right. I was being less good. I wasn't licking any doorknobs because that's just gross for any circumstance. And I don't understand why that's a social media challenge. Like, that's awful. But I had...
Wait, hold on. Sidebar. Is that a real thing that
yeah, that's
people
a real
are doing?
thing. That's a real thing.
Cool.
Yeah, my brother
Cool
texted me about
times.
it. I was just like, really? Really? How stupid are we? I'm always shocked at the new levels of stupidity that we face.
I use cardio to de-stress. I do a lot of ClassPass. When working normal hours, I bike to and from work. It's about 2.5 miles there. And when I can't do either a workout class or bike to the office, I do this thing I call a dance party. It's highly embarrassing. I try not to tell anyone who doesn't live with me anything about it.
So you're telling it on the pod.
I'm telling it on the pod. Essentially, I put my headphones on and I run around in a circle for 30 to 60 minutes. It's not great. My downstairs neighbors
have... You're like a little dog who doesn't have a yard.
Exactly.
Poor Mego.
Yep. I do this. I do some form of cardio daily, and my downstairs neighbors hate me.
As do mine now, so.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll do this more than once if I'm really stressed or if I'm really down. So I do this iPod run thing really a lot. So it's my lunch break, and I walk into my mostly empty room, and I start a song, and about halfway through the song, I feel like I just ran a 5K at elevation. I take my headphones off, and I prep my lunch. After 20 minutes, my breathing still hasn't returned to normal. I use a thermometer to take my temperature, and it's 100.5. Colin says that the thermometer has been weird, so I turn it off and back on again. 100.5. I put it down. I wait another 40 minutes. I'm on a conference call for client B, but luckily I'm not presenting. I attempt the temperature one more time because I still haven't caught my breath. 100.7. I take it 2 more times, trying different angles under my tongue. 100.7, 100.7. The reality that I am symptomatic for coronavirus sets in, and tears that I didn't even feel coming start seeping out. I am so scared. There's a logical part of my brain that's saying I'm young and healthy, and there's a small section saying, oh my God, you have it. You have it, and regardless, there's that 2%, and you exposed your husband to it, and your friends, and your coworkers, and the strangers at Trader Joe's. I text Colin because he's not home. I text Anne as a heads up that I might not be available to work soon. That I may actually be at home sick. Anne says, see how you feel tomorrow and call your doctor. I pull myself together by the time the conference call is over, and I put on my Client B project manager hat and start delegating away. Colin comes home, and the two of us wear face masks. He moves his stuff into the guest bedroom, where he will continue to sleep until I feel better. I have a lighting call for Client A in the later half of the day, and the call was notably hostile and very stressful. I was out of breath for the full 2 hours. I go to bed alone, and all I can think of is how much I could go for a cuddle. Wednesday, March 19th. I feel worse in the morning. My throat is dry, and I'm out of breath, and I've done nothing. My body ached, and it's really hard to wake up. But I make my way to my desk. I have major weekly deadlines from now until April 10th, and if I miss one, I'm screwed. Anne texts me first thing in the morning. All I say is more chest pain, but still alive. She replies, go to the doctor. And I say, on the list for lunch. Colin is working from home today. I have more calls over lunch. In California, you have 3 tiers of medical care readily available to you. Your general practitioner, urgent care, when you can't wait a week to see a doctor, but you're not going to immediately die, and the emergency room. The day before, I had called our local urgent care, and they said they didn't have the coronavirus test, but anytime you have lung trouble, you should see a doctor. I tasked Colin with finding me a coronavirus test in Long Beach. And I don't know, Colin, if you want to talk about the first time you tried to source a coronavirus test.
Yeah, the first time I called the Long Beach Health Department's coronavirus hotline, and they, after being on hold for a long time, they told me to make an appointment with our primary care physician, and we just started new insurance, so I had to find that person and then try to make an appointment with them. Basically, I couldn't get in to make an appointment, and they said that they're not doing any coronavirus tests. And the consensus, after a lot of phone calls to a lot of different numbers, the advice was all the same, to just stay home unless you need to go to the hospital.
I text Anne. I may or may not have coronavirus. The world will never know. The articles about Huntington Beach doctor doing drive-through testing and celebrity testing make it seem like if you were symptomatic, you could test. But the cruel fact was there are 1,000 tests for 500,000 people living in Long Beach. The only medical facility in Long Beach that had them was Long Beach Memorial Hospital, and no other medical facility had them.
I think St. Mary's was doing them, but I don't know if they were doing them at this time.
Yeah. No doctor would administer you this test unless you were showing severe symptoms or if you were staff. I was not getting one of those tests. My boss was flabbergasted, but I told me to keep her posted if it felt worse. I had to grab something from my car, and I was desperate to see the sun. I walked 2 flights of stairs to my car and back, and I had to lie down. I share one thought with Colin. I get the hype. I understand why this is really scary. If I were 20 years older, this would hurt like nothing I've ever experienced, and I've passed kidney stones. My nanny, sister, and brother call me to settle a categories argument. After casting my vote, it casually slips out that I've been symptomatic of corona. I didn't know whether or not I should tell them, but it came out. I told them not to worry, that I mostly felt fine. It was just a bit of chest pain. They accept the answer. They tell me they love me, and we hang up. A little while later, my sister calls me, and girl has questions. Mostly she wanted to see if I was okay. And then she started shifting to probing questions. Like, exactly how similar are our lifestyles, and how worried should she be? Which I think is a natural human response. Like, when you find someone who has it, you're like, oh, okay, so how much do we do the same? She mostly asked me about smoking. I have not been a real cigarette smoker since grad school, and I'm not sure how many people knew that I was previously, but that's a true story. When Client B's project began to take over my life, I bought an emergency pack of cigarettes, which I only had like a couple, waited several months, and then had another, which was painfully stale. And so I wouldn't say that I am a smoker as such. I will occasionally smoke marijuana, but I still think that is not frequent enough to really consider myself a consistent smoker. After my sister and I hang up, I decide it's time to text my parents. Neither of them respond. I worked until about 10:30 p.m. My throat was the driest I have ever felt it, and with any physical movement, I could feel my chest. Thursday, March 20th. Whoever said coronavirus feels like a cold is full of crap. One of the questions they ask you is, do you have a wet cough or a dry cough? And if you're confused by the difference, let me explain it to you. When you have a cold, flu, or most cough-related sickness, your body is trying to expel phlegm, and you can feel it. I was just coughing nothing. It was air. No phlegm, no smoke, nothing. I don't know if I've ever coughed nothing before. The day when all doctors refused to see me, I set up a telephone appointment that is offered by my insurance. I woke up to find out that they had called me at 5:30 a.m., and they'd canceled my appointment because I did not answer at 5:30 a.m. So I am 3 days symptomatic, still have not talked to a medical professional. I was so unbelievably exhausted in the morning, but I had so much work to do. My cough had worsened, but I got on my first conference call for the day. During that hour, Colin's mom texted us, asking how we were doing. Colin responded, great! Then he texted me, questioning whether or not we should actually tell her.
I didn't want her to worry.
I escaped most of Colin's inner journey regarding this decision since I was on the call, but ultimately he came to the conclusion, to be honest. And the expected parental panic finally reached my phone in the form of my mother-in-law. In all fairness to Nanny, she was also fairly worried. Colin's mom shipped us a bunch of extra face masks and zinc pills, and between the two of us, we told the truth, which was I was definitely sick, but I was ultimately going to be fine. I checked my personal email account, and my dad had emailed me. He emailed me an article from a non-credible source about how I wasn't really sick, but I was feeling the way I did because I'm vegan. I made a choice not to respond.
Probably the best choice in that situation.
After the initial alert on Tuesday, Anne emailed Dick and Jane to tell them what was happening, and they were sending me daily check-in texts. Jane seemed to be on a similar level of worried as Colin's mom. They had not yet alerted the offices to my condition. After 3 days of symptoms, I decided it was time to alert my circle. I texted Caroline, Joanna, and I stared at a group text for our Utah friend group lovingly referred to as the bitches. I was scared to what the reaction would be. So I started with texting Marcella.
Hey.
She thought maybe to call me, hung up almost immediately, and then called Colin.
Look, I didn't know how tired your lungs were and if calling was going to make it worse, so I called your husband.
Which was the right choice.
It was thoughtful, not weird.
It was definitely the right
It was
choice.
thoughtful. It was the sweetest phone call, dear listener.
Yeah. The thing I remember most from that phone call is Marcella threatened if I didn't take my symptoms more seriously and if I didn't stop working, she was going to discover teleportation and then punch me in the face.
I've been looking for a reason to like really research teleportation, and that seemed like a good one.
I worked until about almost midnight that night, but I didn't get to sleep until much later. A 34-year-old died after catching coronavirus, most likely at Disney World. That story hit way too close to home. We were at the resort during the same weekend. The CDC has a COVID-19 symptom checker. They recommended going to the emergency room if you're coughing up blood or if your lips turn blue. I haven't been able to breathe comfortably for 3 days. Is that what's going to happen to me? Is all I kept thinking. This is going to be a monologue called Megan's Inner Thoughts at 12:30 in the morning.
I'm excited.
Governor Gavin Newsom orders all Californians to stay at home. If extreme measures aren't taken, 56% of state's population could be infected. The UK is kind of being a dumbass about the whole situation. Boris Johnson is not much better of a leader than our own. How is Florida open for spring break? These kids are selfish morons. 34 is young. It's so young. Did I get sick in Disney World? My dad was with me in Disney World. He's been to Disney World twice in the time frame he could get sick, and he's still not taking this seriously. He had a heart attack earlier this year. I'm not ready to lose him. I think a huge problem is how many boomers don't think they're old. I know they don't think they're old because they still think of us as kids. I'm a grown-ass adult. I'm trusted to manage some pretty large and important projects. The moon landing was 51 years ago. The moon landing is middle-aged. If you can remember the moon landing, you're old. If you've been married long enough that people think the fact you're still sexually active is adorable, you're old. I've made that joke before. Nobody laughed. Am I funny or obnoxious? Or am I just immature? I'm fairly obsessed with sex education for someone my age. Maybe I'm fixated on remaining 19 forever. Is that what's also wrong with boomers? Maybe not all boomers, but the ones whose kids are having to plead their parents to just stay home? Are those the parents of the kids who went to Florida for spring break? God, I miss Colin. I would have been asleep an hour ago if he was giving me a safety cuddle. I really miss human contact. I just want a hug. If sex is an option, I'll take that too, but I really just want the hug. If I tried to have sex right now, I think I would pass out for gasping for air. That sounds traumatizing. Are people with heart disease allowed to have sex? They're not supposed to elevate their heart rate. How does that work? What time is it? 1:45. Oh my god, I'm so exhausted. How am I still awake? If I wrap myself in this duvet just right and strategically place the pillows, maybe it'll feel like Colin is spooning me. No, it doesn't. Holy crap, it's 2:15. My throat is so dry, maybe I'm just dehydrated. I hope Governor Newsom continues to ignore Trump and follow the advice of his doctor. It's expensive, but it's nice to live in the liberal bubble. Friday, March 21st. I woke up feeling completely and visibly awful. I ached and I wanted nothing more than to stay in bed. The ultimate motivation was my water bottle was empty, and my need for water outweighed everything else I was feeling. My phone rang. I needed to answer questions to one of my coworkers for 3 minutes. He did the majority of the talking, and I found I could not stand to remain on the phone for much longer. I was quickly coming to terms with words that I never say. I kept answering questions about the major deadline we had, finding each answer more and more difficult. By 11:45, I finally texted Anne, I can't keep working. Normally, to take a sick day is inconvenient, but to do so because you're symptomatic of a global pandemic is terrifying. It was admitting something I really didn't want to admit. We had a mandatory company conference call at noon that I called into. When they called my name for roll call, all I said was here, and N texted me saying, "You sound awful, hang up."
Good for Anne.
Yeah, good for her.
Colin, you didn't tell me this was happening. I could have been much further along in teleportation research.
I didn't.
This triggered a panic attack, and I curled on my side and began to cry uncontrollably. I heard Colin come in the room. He grabbed a mask and put a hand on my back. It was the only thing he could do, and technically he wasn't supposed to be doing it. It was the best feeling I felt all week. I needed an outlet for my panic attack, any logical feeling to cling on to, and then a fact hit me like a ton of bricks. Anne, Dick, and Jane each had separately texted me more times than my parents had combined. I could no longer talk on the phone, but I knew exactly who I could text. All I had to say to my sister was, "Why don't they care?" I have no idea what my sister said to my parents, but my dad reached out to me in 15 minutes. He called, but I texted him saying that phone conversations were difficult right now. He asked me what my temperature was. 100.3. Big difference there.
Yeah.
100.3 to 100.7 fairly consistently. He asked me if I was dehydrated. I said my water bottle is my new best friend, but my throat is so dry. There's hardly anything I can do to make it less dry. He asked if there was any chance that this was a cold or the flu, and I said, I've had both, and this ain't either. He asked me if my test had confirmed my suspicions, and I explained that unless I took a serious turn for the worst, I was never going to get tested for corona. Then he asked me if I wanted to come to Salt Lake, and all I said was absolutely not. This is my disease, and I'm keeping it to myself. Then he said he loved me, and if there was anything I needed, to just let him know. I said all I wanted was for him to stay home, and he never responded to that. My mom reached out later, and she was mostly focused on my exhaustion and my anxiety. While I don't think she ever took my symptoms all that seriously, I do think she had a point that I was so tired and burned out that it didn't matter how active and healthy I am, my body was looking for an excuse to shut down. My mom wouldn't accept text. She wanted to talk over the phone. I think she thought this was a way of showing how much she cares. Marcelo's right. If you think someone has corona, it's better to text. Like, I could talk to Colin pretty easily, but there's something about a phone call that was just completely and utterly exhausting. I don't know what the logical explanation is between that difference, but it was real. Colin handed me a bunch of drugs, and I say it would be great if my parents just believed me and didn't think I was lying about this. He says he doesn't think that's what's happening. Colin believes that my parents are probably scared, and they don't want to admit their daughter is sick. And I think he's right.
I think he's right, too.
I proceed to sleep for 16 hours. Sunday, March 23rd. I feel much better. I still have a fever, I still have chest pains, I'm still coughing, but I feel much better. I feel so lonely. I take a very long, very thorough shower, I put on a mask, and I beg Colin to talk to me. I promise to keep the mask on and to stay 6 feet away from him, but I just want him to talk to me. During my sickness, he has disinfected everything in the apartment multiple times. I refer to him as my Balto because he does all the cooking, dish cleaning, and supply sourcing. He's Balto.
He's Balto.
He's a very good caregiver, except for one night he served me soup with peas and the fishiest tasting seaweed of all time.
Oh,
You wanted something Asian.
you're a vegan.
The peas were not
All
Asian.
those
but,
things are
you know, I
vegan.
gotta slip in vegetables.
Colin's mom keeps texting us that she's preparing a hazmat suit and she's coming to evac us to Salt Lake City.
God, I love Colin's mom.
They offer still stands.
Each time she sends this, I just verify with Colin that she's joking.
Ish, probably.
50-50.
Ish.
I don't know how much there's. Yes, the joking is. I don't know. I it's hard to tell.
I remember what Marcella said to me on the phone. Getting sick at a long distance is probably a blessing. Like, if we were in Salt Lake, I'm sure my dad and Colin's parents would, like, come, despite all logic saying don't. And I'm really grateful that that wasn't even an option. Like, my dad was trying to figure out how to fly me to Salt Lake. Of course he was going to show up. Like, anytime someone is symptomatic, like, you just need to stay away. And I know that's so bizarre, and it goes against everything that a parent believes for their child, but it's what's got to happen right now. It's weird. Since I'm feeling better on Sunday, I start making up work that I missed on Friday, and I work until about 9:30 p.m. Marcella's shaking your head at me.
Yeah, I was going to say, listener, you can't see my face, but it's not good.
Monday, March 24th. I tell Ann that I'm ready to work. I just can't talk on the phone. Which really should have been the first sign that I'm not ready to work yet.
I mean, I'm glad you fucking said it. Jesus Christ.
I notice that I'm much slower than usual today. The rest of the day proceeds as normal. I finish work at 9 p.m. As I go to sleep, my breathing gets worse. And I start to panic about the fact that my breathing is getting worse. And I Google an informative video on what the difference between coronavirus and COVID-19 actually are. So coronavirus, essentially, and again, you should Google this so that an actual medical professional or a medical video can explain this to you better, because I am neither. But essentially, it's a virus that starts attacking your lung cells, and it spreads that way. Your immune system attacks the virus, but your immune system sometimes gets a little too ham when it comes to protecting your body, and it'll kill the bad cells as well as the good ones. And once it's done attacking the virus, the big risk is with your immune system temporarily down, you get a bigger infection or a separate disease that goes through your body, which has now been left defenseless, particularly your lungs. And that is COVID-19. So technically, we are dealing with COVID-19 as caused by a particular strain of the coronavirus, which I forget the name of. This thing has the longest fucking name of all time. So the fact that I couldn't breathe again and my symptoms were going worse, the logical answer to this, of course, is that I was never truly better in the first place, and I tried to push myself too soon. But in my mind, I was thinking that I was getting sick again because my immune system was down, and now I was developing an infection. Which explains my mindset on Tuesday morning. So, Tuesday, March 25th, I wake up feeling terrible. The pressure on my chest is akin to a small child or a large toddler. I'm panicking, and I text Anne that I feel worse, and she immediately says, go get medical attention, and instructs me to stop working immediately. She sent a separate email to everyone who was working on the Client B project saying that they were not allowed to reach out to me until further notice. That I would not be answering any work emails. I would not be accepting any calls. She basically took charge and said that any communication that is intended to Megan goes through Anne first.
Question. Had Anne made the rest of your company aware of your illness?
So more than half is on that. What ended up happening later in the day was Jane texted or emailed the entire office. And I was CC'd on that one because it was just like one of those Outlook groups that includes everyone. And being the subject of an office-wide email to say that you have a pandemic degree illness is a terrifying experience. I just wanted a doctor to talk to me. I wanted any doctor to talk to me. And so Colin and I get in the car. I stayed in the car. We both had face masks on. Still not great. Still not great practice, but we were doing the best we could. I stayed in the car. He got out. He went to the urgent care to see if he could get me into a doctor. There were signs everywhere that said, if you think you are symptomatic of COVID-19 or if you've come into contact with someone, don't come in this building. He comes back. He tried calling my primary care doctor earlier. They wouldn't answer. And so we drove to the emergency room. And we get there. And all of a sudden, as soon as we sit outside the emergency room, I begin to breathe a lot easier. And I'm looking at that building, and I'm thinking of people who are blue in the lips and coughing up blood who actually need to be in there. And although I am desperate to talk to any medical professional, I'm not there yet. Colin decides to go up to the emergency room to see even if there's just a doctor we can talk to. I don't know, Colin, if you want to talk about what happened when you went up to Long Beach Memorial.
Oh, not a whole lot to tell. They were definitely preparing for the worst. There were people outside checking you in as you went in, and they had gowns and masks and face shields on, and they had this outdoor waiting area that was covered in a tent. But the short story is that they told me the same thing as the primary care and the urgent care, was that they are only testing the sickest people. So basically, to stay home and self-quarantine unless you are unless you need a ventilator, unless you need to go to the hospital, stay home.
So Colin comes back to the car, and he asked me to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star at him to see if I can make it through the full song. And I could.
Creative take. I like it.
Yeah. She could do Twinkle Twinkle, but not Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well,
so
that is
still pretty good.
So I text Anne that I am too sick and not sick enough to see a doctor. I was too sick to see my primary care doctor. I was not sick enough to go to the emergency room. And so I was seeing nobody. I had been able to breathe for a week, and I had talked to nobody who could give me professional advice. And that's when Jane officially emailed the office about what was happening. They told them my symptoms. They said that I could not get tested for the virus. They gave the office the entire story, which was, our doctors right now are so overwhelmed. I'm not mad, really, that I didn't get to talk to a medical care professional. They're so overwhelmed right now. I can't be mad at them. This is just a shitty situation. So, at this point, we were back in the apartment, and after the office-wide email had been sent, every single one of my coworkers started texting me, and that set off another chain reaction of crying, because when too many people are worried about you.
I mean, for me, it's just one. The second somebody shows compassion, I'm just like, oh God, feelings. So yeah. That sounds like a lot of tears.
Colin and I are really good friends with a gentleman named Ken who I work with, and Colin texts Ken immediately, and he's like, "Get people to stop talking to Megan."
Tell them to cool. I just told him to tell them to cool it, that it was making it worse.
And I had 3 clients also text me.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was bizarre. It was really, really bizarre. I went to bed and I slept and I slept and I slept. And then on Wednesday, The other person that happened on Tuesday. So this is my dad's swan song. This is his big redeeming moment. So I had texted my dad an update because he heard that I was doing worse. And I told him, I can't see a doctor. No doctor will see me. And he was like, okay, give me an hour. He went to his neighbor, who is an emergency room doctor. And it happened to be his day off. And he called me. My dad had to call in a favor to get me to see a doctor. And he made me feel 3,000 times better. And he started with, I can see why you're freaking out. You don't have asthma, so you don't know what it's like not to breathe. I'm like, yeah, basically that. And he was like, what we define as moderate cases is if you can't walk from your bedroom to your bathroom, which I was able to do. He was like, right now we're so overwhelmed that we won't start admitting people to the hospital that unless it seems like they're starting to have lack of oxygen in the blood. And he's like, and you can tell when you've hit that. He was like, visibly you can tell when a person feels that awful. And he was like, and the CDC is right. You have a bunch of other symptoms that go into it. And he was basically calming me down. You know, he's like, sounds like you're sick, but he said that I have the exact correct combination of factors to get over this. I'm under 30. I'm really healthy. And I'm a girl. Apparently, this affects men worse than it does women, which I'm sure that there's some other anecdotal evidence as to why that is. But right now, all the medical community has to go off of is that statistic.
It's like the common cold. It always affects men worse.
And then he said, I understand right now that you're worried because the media is promoting all the bad stories right now. You know, you hear the stories of the kids under 30 who are getting this and dying. And he was like, and I heard you were in Disney World at the same time as that kid, and it's so sad. And he's like, but the chances of you getting to that same point are so minimal. It's like, you might be that special, but you're probably not.
I like that sentence. I like that sentence so much.
So he hung up, and I texted my dad, and again, that was the best thing I think he's ever given me. The next day, finally, my insurance doctor calls me back. And she says a lot of the same thing that the emergency room doctor said. But then she added these rules. She says that typically this disease lasts for 2 weeks of symptoms. You are allowed to leave the house and have Colin rejoin you in your bedroom after 1 week of symptoms or 3 days after no symptoms, whichever one happens last, if that makes sense. So, like, since I started being symptomatic on Monday, if symptoms stopped showing up on Wednesday, I would still have to wait until Monday before I could leave the house. Since I was symptomatic from Monday until Thursday of a week following, I have to wait until Sunday for Colin to come back. Loss of symptoms include the fever going away and breathing returning to normal. The cough will last 5 million years. She was like, you know when you get a cold and you're still coughing like a month later? She's like, it's going to be the same thing with this. You're probably fine, but the cough will remain. And I asked her, I mean, the number one thing I'm worried about right now is I was never formally tested. What if I have something else? Like, what if I have a bacterial infection? And she said, with bacterial infections, they're looking for fevers of 101 plus constant for 72 hours. She's like, if you have a fever or if you have a bacterial infection, you'll probably feel the shift in symptoms instead of corona. That was it. So I took my medical advice and I slept, 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 and I don't have much to report on because
And
it
you
was mostly
stopped
sleep.
working. You finally stopped working.
Yeah, I
I
feel
did.
like we should drive that point home a little bit more so that the next time she's
Through-
like, I'm sick, but everything's fine. We can be like,
Right.
remember that one time you thought we
I
were going to
didn't-
die from coronavirus and how it had everything to do with you working all day?
Yeah. At the beginning, I didn't know how serious things were because she was on these conference calls all day. So I thought, well, it must not be so bad.
I'm
But
just
yeah.
a liar and very bad at taking care of myself.
Oh, Meg.
Yeah, sounds right.
So on Thursday, I officially was no longer showing symptoms. My breathing had returned to normal, my fever had gone, and I texted Anne to say that I was no longer showing symptoms, and she was like, I don't care, you're not returning to work until Monday.
I love Anne.
Which,
Mm.
God, I love Anne.
so ultimately, I mean, I knew I was feeling completely better as of Friday, because all sexual innuendo aside, this entire time, all I wanted to do was hold Colin's hand. That's all I wanted. You know, when you feel bad, all you want is a cuddle from someone you love. And then on Friday, I began feeling the painful realization that this is the longest that we've gone without having sex. And I was like, okay, I feel better now.
That urge is back.
I will say, generally, my advice coming out of all of this is kind of what Marcella and Colin have already harped on. If you feel sick, stop. Just stop. Stop and take care of yourself and give this the respect it deserves. The work will always be there for you. It'll be there when you get back. And I will also give a lot of applause to my employer. They took this really seriously, and I think it's easy from a capitalist standpoint that if your worker is saying, I feel good enough, to be like, okay, they said they feel good enough, and knows me better than that, and was just like, I'm not believing you anymore. Like, your work will still be here for you on Monday. We're not going to fire you because you had coronavirus. Like, it ain't going anywhere. You know, she reminded me that I'm a lighting designer. No one's going to die if they get their plans a week late. It's not that important.
Yeah, what's a bigger impact to your team? Disappearing for a few days to take care of your health or dying from coronavirus and never giving them an answer again? I think that's just kind of where I'm at, Megan.
But this is day 3, right, Meg?
No,
Day
yesterday
3, no
was
symptoms.
day 3. Today you're allowed back. You can come back
Oh,
to our
I'm
bedroom.
allowed back. I'm terrified of our bedroom.
I'm cleaning it. It's on my list for today.
Maybe Megan can go to the
Sanitize
guest
everything.
room.
So that's my experience with Corona. My mom eventually came back from Mexico and she made it to DC, and now she's panicking. Like, she's going on the same panic that the rest of us were going on 2 weeks ago, and I'm kind of like, yeah, welcome to the party.
Yeah.
This is what
Yeah,
you were
welcome
missing.
to the end of the world.
But yeah, we good now. But
That is good.
I will say that ultimately the lessons to be learned in this is A, take care of yourself if you're sick, and B, I understand that it's scary when someone gets sick, but, you know, maybe text them. Like, don't text them that they're going to die, but be like, hey, what did you do today?
How are you? I love you.
Don't all text them at the same time. If everyone is sending their love all at the same time, then it becomes a little scary.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much to learn here, and I feel like so many people who have chronic illnesses, I feel like this is something that they would have been like, yeah, duh, welcome to my life. Believe it when people say they have symptoms. Like, stop questioning and undermining all of everybody else when they say they have something. They have something. Yeah, like, I think that's the thing that breaks my heart the most is so many people are just trying to explain away somebody's symptoms. And I get it because I do it to myself, right? Like we were saying in the last episode, like, it's so easy to be like, oh, I have anxiety right now, which is why I'm short of breath, or I have this. But if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm legitimately concerned that I have these symptoms or that I'm feeling these things, it isn't your job to question them. It's your job to support them.
I think the last thing I'm going to say about this whole thing is I've been doing fine this week. I have a lot of respect for Governor Newsom and Governor Cuomo, who are taking this really seriously with their states. New York City is crazy affected right now. And as I said earlier, I think people were always anticipating that. It's really, really hard to contain something in New York. It's a huge, huge city with a large population that are really close to each other.
Yeah, it's a small city with a huge population where we're all really close to each other.
And hopefully, I hope Marcel is doing okay through all this. Like, I hear it's eerie there.
Yeah, it's quiet. I mean, something that I'd like to add to all of this is I'm really thankful. Governor Cuomo has definitely spoken to it, but there's a lot of like loneliness and mental health issues that comes with all of this. Just as Megan was talking about how much she craved human touch and how Colin being there just to put a hand on her back really made a difference into her emotional status. There are a lot of people in this world who don't have that available to them right now. There's a lot of like loneliness and mental health. So like, let's be thankful for our friends. I'm thankful for being able to jump on the podcast or also just talking to Megan and Colin throughout the week. So yeah, I don't know. I'd like to end with like some positivity of things that we can be grateful for, as well as recognizing that not everybody has the things that we here on this podcast have the privilege to have.
Yeah. We've all been able to work from home, and that's just not possible for so many people.
Yeah, we all have our jobs.
Things are gonna looking like things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. So we really have to find ways to be here for each other from a distance.
You continue to call your grandparents and your parents, especially, like people who really can't leave the house. I think my favorite things so far have been doing like group watches of Netflix. One of my English friends threw a pub quiz using Zoom earlier this week, and that was a ton of fun.
That's awesome.
Very fun.
And there's so many ways to take this quarantine and make it better. One thing that did throw me into another panic this week was when President Trump said that the country would be back to work by Easter. And after getting over this virus, I'm like, holy crap, please don't let that be true. Like, I mean it when I say that this would have been so much worse if I was 20 years older.
Or less able-bodied.
Yeah. Like, again, I want this to be a symbol of hope for anyone who has minor symptoms to not panic as much as I did. It's going to be okay. Like, I really feel better. I really, really do. Like, I'm ready to run again. I'm happy talking through this conversation. I'm ready to get back at it. Like, other pains of quarantine are starting to affect me. Like, I just want to go outside, which I'm sure everyone is feeling right now. But it will get better if you have minor symptoms. But do not think that it's fake. Like, any stories about the moderate to severe symptoms are still very, very true. But again, to end this on a positive note, I feel great. I get to hold hands again today. That's pretty dope.
Yeah. We hugged.
Aww.
We did. We hugged this morning.
We got to hug.
And yeah, the service industry is really going to be hit hard by this. So if you are able to right now, continue to order delivery from your local restaurants. If you're in a state that allows alcoholic delivery, you can get cocktails delivered from bars. Sorry, Utah. And, like, we're all in this together, and we're all going to make it out of this together. And one day, this will be something that will be a brief mentioning in history books and not much more.
Yeah. Yeah, support local businesses.
Yeah.
Everybody's hurting right now. If you're spending your time reading books, try to find a local bookstore that'll ship you your books, because it's not only Amazon, not only them.
Colin, anything else?
Nope. I mean, we just have to be good to each other, take everything one day at a time, and really find ways to reach out. Honestly, one good thing is that I felt almost more social during the quarantine than I usually am. Or I guess it's not technically a quarantine, a lockdown or whatever. So, because I've had a real good reason to reach out to people, so just got to try to keep that up. Oh yeah, and get off Twitter, get off the news. Turn the phone off, if you're not talking to a friend, stay off your phone, stay off the internet, because your brain can only handle so much.
Seriously, like, right now, all the news stories are like corona after corona after corona. You can only get the stay at home and wash your hands lecture so many times before you start going down
Right.
a spiral of panic. But in short, that's all I got.
Okay.
I got coronavirus, maybe, most likely, and survived, and I'm still looking for a t-shirt.
Follow us on social media. You've got nothing else to do.
I'm Megan.
I'm Marcella.
I'm Colin.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
You will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
An absence of
Oh, yeah, you don't have to be thinking about sex.